In this lecture, you'll see how to configure SnapMirror data protection mirrors using the command line interface with a lab demo. You'll see how to configure the mirrors using both the SnapMirror create and also the SnapMirror protect command, and you'll also see how to configure both synchronous and asynchronous replication. The scenario here is that I'm going to replicate volumes from the NAS SVM in cluster 1 to an SVM named NAS_M in cluster 2. And I've already configured the initial cluster and SVM peering. But let's verify that. So I'll do a vServer peer show on cluster 1. And there you can see that the local NAS SVM is peered with the NAS_M SVM on cluster 2. If you need to see how to do that initial peering setup, it was covered in the lectures earlier on in this section. Okay, let's see the volumes that are in the NAS SVM. So I'll do a volume show for vServer NAS on cluster 1. And you can see I've got my SVM root volumes there and a couple of load sharing mirrors for those that were configured earlier. And I've got a volume 1 and a volume 2. I'm going to replicate both of those volumes. First off, I'll do volume 1 using the SnapMirror create command, and we'll do asynchronous replication. Then I will replicate vol 2 using synchronous replication and the SnapMirror protect command. Okay, so the first one to do is vol 1. So before we do it, let's just have a look at how clients are accessing the data as well. So I'll do a vServer sys share show, and you can see that for my NAS SVM, I've got CIFS already configured on there, and I am sharing vol 1 and vol 2. Okay, so first up, let's replicate volume 1 over from the NAS SVM in cluster 1 to the NAS_M SVM in cluster 2. And I'm going to do asynchronous replication here, and I'm going to use a schedule of just 1 minute. Real world, quite likely it wouldn't be as frequent as that when you're doing asynchronous replication. I'm just going to do it really frequently here so we can see the changes updating quickly in the lab. When you configure SnapMirror at the command line, the configuration is all done on the destination cluster and the data is pulled over there from the source. So cluster 2 is the destination here. So I will go on to cluster 2 now. And because we're going to be replicating every 1 minute, I need to have a 1 minute schedule for that. So let's just see if there's a system schedule for 1 minute. So I'll do a job schedule cron show. And if I just scroll up a little bit here, you can see that the most frequent default system schedule is 5 minutes. So I'm going to have to create a custom schedule here. The command to do that is job schedule cron create. I'll hit a question mark to check the syntax, and you see that I need to specify the name that I'm going to name the schedule and then how often it is going to run. Now I'm going to be running this every minute, so this is a pretty long command. So I'm just going to copy and paste it from another window. So I'm copying it from my other window here, and I'll paste it in. So you see we've got job schedule cron create. Then I've named it 1min, and I'm saying it's going to run on the minutes, and it's every minute from 0 through 259. And I'll hit enter there, and then just verify it's okay with the show command again. And there I can see my 1 minute schedule. Okay, so I've got my schedule done. Next up, I'm going to create the actual SnapMirror relationship. And I'm going to use the SnapMirror create command here. When I use the SnapMirror create command, it's broken down into 3 separate commands. First off, I have to create the destination volume with the volume create command. Then I create the SnapMirror relationship with SnapMirror create. And then finally, I need to initialize to do the initial baseline transfer using the SnapMirror initialize command. So let's create the volume first. So just before I do that, let's see what volumes are currently in the destination vServer. So I'll do a volume show for vServer, and I'm going to replicate into the NAS underscore M SVM here. And you can see I've only got the SVM root volume there, don't have any other volumes yet. Okay, so let's create that destination volume. So I say volume create, the vServer is NAS underscore M, and the volume, I'm going to name this vol1 is the name of the source volume. So I'll name this vol1 underscore M to show that it is a destination mirror volume. The aggregate that I will put this in, I'll put it in aggregate 1 underscore C2N1, because I know that that aggregate is free as a data aggregate. And I'll make it size, the same size as the source volume, which was 100 megabytes, and type DP. So this is the same command as when you create a normal volume. What makes it a SnapMirror destination volume is specifying type DP. And then when that has finished creating, I'll do my volume show command again, and you can see there it is there. And you can see that the type is DP, so that is a read-only volume. Okay, I've got my volume created. Next, I need to create my SnapMirror relationship. The command for that is SnapMirror create. And let's check the syntax here. So lots of different options there. First thing that I am going to specify is the destination path. That is the volume that I'm going to replicate the data into. The syntax for this is the SVM name and then the volume name. So on the destination side, the SVM is NAS underscore M, and then I put in a colon, and then the vol name is vol1 underscore M, the volume that I just created. I also need to specify the source path. The source path, the SVM on cluster 1 is NAS, and the volume that I'm replicating here is vol1. Then I need to specify the type. I'll just hit a question mark here. You can see I can use type DP, which is the old deprecated type for DP mirrors. LS is for load sharing. XDP is my extended data protection. I've also got a TDP. That is used when we're doing a migration from 7 mode over to cluster mode. So the type I want to use here is type XDP. Then I need to specify the policy that I want to use. Let's hit a question mark there, and you can see the default system policies there. And the main ones for SnapMirror DP mirrors are you can use mirror all snapshots. That's if you want to mirror the existing normal snapshots in the source volume, or you can just do mirror latest, which will just replicate the active file system without the actual normal snapshots in the source volume. I'm going to mirror everything over here, including the snapshots, so I'll use a policy of mirror all snapshots. And then finally, I need to specify the schedule, how often I'm going to replicate, and what I named my cron schedule was 1min. So that's everything done there. That's the SnapMirror relationship done now. If I do a SnapMirror show at this point, you'll see that the status is uninitialized because I still need to initialize the relationship to perform that initial baseline transfer. So I will do that now with SnapMirror initialize. And here I can just specify the destination path. You can only replicate one source volume to a particular destination volume. So when I specify the destination path, the system knows which SnapMirror relationship I'm talking about here. So the destination path was NAS underscore M colon vol1 underscore M, and hit enter. And then I'll do a SnapMirror show again. and you can see it's still uninitialized because it's currently transferring the data over. So that's why it's finalizing and the health is false. It's because it hasn't completed yet. I'll do a SnapMirror show again, and I can see the progress before was 0 bytes. It's now up to 15.33. So it's moving the data across now. And I do a SnapMirror show again, and I can now see that the status is idle and the health is true. So it has finished replicating the data across. So that's all good. Let's have a look and check that the SnapMirror snapshot is in the destination volume. So I'll do a volume snapshot show, and this is for vserver NAS_M, and the volume is vol1_M. And there I can see that on my source volume, there was already a normal snapshot had been created there, which was an hourly snapshot. That's been replicated over to the destination. And I can see there are my 2 SnapMirror snapshots as well. It's always going to keep 2 SnapMirror snapshots here, because the way that it works is whenever it's time for a new replication, it takes a new snapshot, deletes the oldest one, and it then compares the current snapshot with the previous one to see which blocks need to be replicated over. Okay, so that's all of the SnapMirror configuration done there, and I can see everything's working. Let's also do a volume show. So I'll do a volume show for vserver NAS_M, and the volume was vol1_M. In fact, I've got loads of output there, so let's just do a volume show for vserver of NAS_M, and then I can see vol_1M, and I can see that its size 100 megabytes. It's got less than that available, and 16% is used, so the data has been replicated across. Actually, if I go on to cluster 1 and do a volume show there for vserver NAS, and look at vol1, I can see, yeah, it had about 20 megs worth of data in there. That has been replicated over to cluster 2. Okay, so that's how you do a SnapMirror DP mirror using the SnapMirror create command, and that was asynchronous replication. Next up, let's use the SnapMirror protect command to configure synchronous replication. And with the SnapMirror protect command, I can do all 3 steps in just one command. So with SnapMirror create, we had to do the volume create, then the SnapMirror create, and then the SnapMirror initialize. All 3 of those are consolidated into one single command when you use SnapMirror protect. With SnapMirror protect, you can also protect multiple volumes at the same time. You can't do that with SnapMirror create. With SnapMirror create, you can protect multiple volumes, but you'd have to do each one separately. Okay, so back on cluster 1, notice there was also a vol2 there as well, so we'll protect vol2 with synchronous replication. Again, the configuration is pulled over from the destination cluster, so I'm going to configure this over on cluster 2. And the command I'm going to use is SnapMirror protect. Let's do a question mark to check the syntax there. And what I need to enter here is, first off, the path list. And what I want to protect here is in the NAS SVM, so NAS:, and it's going to be vol2 here. I could have protected both volumes at the same time using the SnapMirror protect command. The way I would have done that would have been a path list of NAS:vol, and that would have matched both vol1 and vol2 because they both begin with vol. However, because I'm using different settings for vol1 and vol2, then I'm going to have to use a different command for that. So here I am protecting vol2, and the destination vserver is NAS_M. The policy that I want to use here, question mark again. And for synchronous replication, you can either use sync. If you use sync, then if replication goes down, you can still make changes to the source volume, or you can use strict sync. If you use strict sync, then if the replication goes down, it's not going to allow you to make changes to the source volume. Both of them used synchronous replication. Here, I will use the policy of sync, and then I'm going to specify a destination dash volume dash suffix of _m. And let's try that policy again with the correct case. So I need to use a capital S for sync, and that looks better now. Okay, so that is now going to create the volume for me here in my destination cluster. It's also going to create the SnapMirror relationship, and it's also going to initialize it as well. So let's do a volume show for vserver NAS _m. And there I can see it's created vol2 and it's put the _m on there because I configured that as being the volume suffix. Next up, let's do a SnapMirror show. And I can see right now that for vol2, it is uninitialized and it's false. And it looks like it's not trying to do the transfer either. So if you do a SnapMirror show command and you're seeing that things are not looking good, like it's not healthy or the transfer isn't working, the next thing to do is to get more granular information about that particular SnapMirror relationship. So I will say SnapMirror show, and this was for source path is NAS vol2. The destination path is NAS _m vol2 _m, and I'll say dash instance to get the full verbose output. So this is a really useful command to get really granular information about a SnapMirror relationship. You can see information in here like when the last transfer completed, which can be useful. And also you can see in here that the health is false, and the reason is that the transfer failed. And if I have a scroll through the rest of this, you can see the last transfer error. It's going to tell me what the problem is. And the problem is that the SnapMirror synchronous license was not found. So for asynchronous mirrors, you just need the SnapMirror license. But for SnapMirror synchronous, you also need to have an additional SnapMirror synchronous license added as well. That's not supported on the simulator, so we can't actually do the synchronous replication on the simulator, but we are able to do the configuration. So you already saw there how to set it up. Okay, so you've seen how to verify SnapMirror from the destination cluster. Let's jump onto the source cluster now, cluster 1. And on here, if I do a SnapMirror show, you're going to see I've just got those load sharing mirrors that I created earlier. The DP mirrors that I've created on cluster 2 to replicate over there do not show up when I do a SnapMirror show command on cluster 1. And that is because the configuration was all done on cluster 2. So how can I check and see what SnapMirror relationships is cluster 1 a source for? Well, the command to use for that is SnapMirror and then list destinations. And there I can see I've got my NAS vol1 being replicated over to vol1 _m on cluster 2. And there's also the SnapMirror relationship for vol2 as well. Another thing that I can check over here is that the SnapMirror snapshot is being created in the source volume. So for that, let's do a volume snapshot show. And the vserver is NAS and the volume is vol1. And there I can see my normal snapshots being created. Another normal one has been created since the last SnapMirror replication. And there I can see the SnapMirror snapshot for my DP mirror. Okay, so that is the SnapMirror replication all configured and working. Next thing that I will do is do a failover to the disaster recovery site. Before I do that, let's just check that everything looks okay on the client. So I'll go onto my WinA client here. Let me just make this go full screen. And there you can see that it is able to connect to Vol1 in the source cluster on cluster 1. Everything looks okay. I can read it. And let's just check that I can write here as well. So I'll make a new text document. Let's call this test 1. So everything is okay right now with both of my clusters are up. Currently, cluster 1 has got the read-write copy of Vol1, and my disaster recovery site, cluster 2, has got the read-only copy. Now let's fail over to cluster 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut down, I'm going to suspend both nodes in cluster 1 to simulate cluster 1 failing. Well, it's not really simulating it. I am actually suspending it. So now that I've done this, cluster 1 is now down. And back on the Windows client, if I try to access the volume now, I'm going to see that's not going to work because the cluster has gone down. So what I need to do is fail over to cluster 2, and then the client will still be able to get access to that volume. So to do that, it's all going to be configured on cluster 2. That's a good thing because cluster 1 is down right now. So I'll go back on to cluster 2, and then in here, let's do a volume show. And I can see that right now for Vol1, it's a DP volume, so it's read-only, so I can't use it for writing changes to the volume. I want to fail over to make that volume the writable copy. So I'm going to need to break the SnapMirror relationship to be able to do that. So let's do a SnapMirror show. And I can see that right now it is trying to do a transfer. Obviously, that's going to fail because cluster 1 is down. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to abort that transfer. So the command for that is SnapMirror abort. The source path is NAS:vol1, and the destination path is NAS_M: vol1_M. I should now be able to do a SnapMirror KS to pause future transfers. And then finally, I want to do a SnapMirror break, which will break the SnapMirror relationship and make this destination side a writable volume. Okay, so that all succeeded. I can now do a SnapMirror show, and I can see that the status now is broken off. And if I do a volume show again, I can see that my volume1_M, it's no longer a type DP, it is now type read-write. So my clients will be able to write to that volume. However, when you do a SnapMirror relationship, it just replicates the data from the source volume to the destination volume. It doesn't replicate all of the ONTAP settings, for example, sharing the volume, that are going to allow your clients to have access. So I also need to do that. First, let's check and see if volume 1 is mounted in the namespace or not over on the destination cluster. So I'll do a volume show. This is vserver NAS_M. The volume is vol1_M. And I don't want to get all the information. I just want to see if it's mounted in the namespace or not. So I'll say fields junction-path. And there you can see that it is not mounted in the namespace, so I need to explicitly do that. Also, let's look and see if it's shared. Obviously, it can't be because it's not even mounted, but I'll just verify that with a vserver sys share show. And right now, there's no share for vol1_M. So I need to configure that before my clients will be able to get access. So I will mount it first. So the command for that is volume mount. The vserver is NAS_M. The volume is vol1 underscore m. And the junction path that I will use for this is the same name as the volume name. So /vol1 underscore m. And say yes to the warning. I'm using CIFS, not NFS, so it's not a problem about not having a matching export policy. And then I need to share it as well. So for that, I will say CIFS share create. The vserver, again, is NAS_M. The share name, let's name this vol1 the same as the share name was on the source volume on cluster 1. So rather than using the volume name of vol1 underscore m, I'm going to use a share name of vol1 because that's what the clients were already connecting to. It will be on a different SVM though. So I'll show you how to connect on Windows in a minute. So I've got the share name, and then the path to this is /vol1 underscore m. Okay, so I've got it mounted in the namespace, and I've created the CIFS share now, so it should be possible to connect to this volume from the client. So let's go on to the Windows server again, and I just need to log in here. So let me send a Control-Alt-Delete, and then enter my password. Okay, I'm in. And I can see that I've lost my connection to NAS/vol1 because cluster 1 is down. I'm going to need connectivity to cluster 2. So let's do the DNS configuration first. So I'll go to Server Manager and then Tools and then DNS. And in the forward lookup zone for my domain, I can see I've got entries there for cluster 1 for the NAS SVM. So I'll right click in here and I'm going to make a new A record for NAS_M in cluster 2. And the logical interfaces that are configured for that SVM are at 172.23.3.21. And there's also one at 172.23.3.22. So I've got my DNS entries added now. And if I open up a command prompt on here and try pinging NAS_M, connectivity is good. So back in Windows Explorer, I will right click on network and I'm going to map a new network drive. And this is to NAS_M in cluster 2 /vol1. So this is the destination volume, and this should have exactly the same contents in it as when it was in cluster 1 when it was being replicated. So I'll hit enter there. I'm able to map the network drive okay, and there you can see that the contents are the same. There's the Windows Defender folder that was in there and the test1 text file that I just made. Okay, so great. So I'm able to get into my volume at the DR site. Now, notice here, this is just for volume 1. If you had other volumes, you would need to do the same configuration for those as well. A way that you can protect all of the volumes in an SVM at the same time is with SVMDR. We'll be covering that later in the section. Okay, but right now we do have access to vol1 again. Let's just check that it is writable. So I will right click in here and make a new text document, and I'll name this one test2 and hit enter. And yes, I can write data there as well. So everything is up and working okay in the DR site. Next thing, let's say that cluster 1 comes back online again. So when cluster 1 comes back online, that is the main site. I want to fail back to cluster 1, and I want cluster 1 to be the writable copy again, and I want to be replicating changes to my read-only copy in cluster 2. But right now, it's cluster 2, which is the writable copy. So we'll say that cluster 1, the physical site, is being recovered. It's ready to come back online. When that happens, I don't want to be making changes in both sites and having an inconsistent copy of the data. So before I fail back to cluster 1, I want to make sure that clients cannot write to cluster 2 while this is happening. So to do that, I will go back onto my ONTAP command line over on cluster 2, and I'm going to say vserver sifs, and I'm going to stop this. So it's vserver sifs stop, and the vserver is named NAS_M. Okay, so that's stopping any writes happening over to cluster 2 while I'm failing back to cluster 1. Let's bring cluster 1 back online now then. So back in VMware, I am going to resume the virtual machines for node 1 and for node 2. That should just take a few seconds to get them back up and running again. But an issue that I have is that I made changes to the volume while it was cluster 2 that was live. So before I make cluster 1 live again, I need to replicate those changes while cluster 1 was down back to cluster 1. And the way that I do that is I create a new SnapMirror relationship, but this one will be in the opposite direction, going from cluster 2 to cluster 1. I can then replicate the changes across, and I can then reverse it again, where I'm going to get back to where I started, with cluster 1 being the main writable site and it replicating its changes to cluster 2. So I've just turned cluster 1 back on again because I'm working in the simulator here. I need to make sure that it is synchronized with the time on my Windows server. So I will do that first. So I'll look at my Windows server, check the time on here. It is 5:19 p.m. on the 14th of July. So let's go back onto the command line for cluster 1. This is probably timed out. Yes, so I'll close this one and open up a new SSH session to cluster 1. Enter in my username and then my password. Managed to do it without a typo there for once. So let me just drag this to the left. In fact, no, let's not. I don't want to mess up my window. Okay, so I'm on cluster 1 now. First thing I need to do is make sure that the time is the same as it is on the Windows server. So I will say cluster date, modify date and time, put in the year and the month and the day, and then let me just check what the time was on Windows again. And over there it's 5:20 p.m. So back in my ONTAP cluster, that will be 17:20. And then cluster date show, just to verify that. And that all looks good. Okay, so I've got the time synchronized with my Windows server. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a SnapMirror relationship so I can replicate those changes made in cluster 2 back to cluster 1 again. So for that, I say SnapMirror create, and this is going to be a mirror image of the SnapMirror relationship that was going from cluster 1 to cluster 2. So now the destination path is going to be my NAS SVM on cluster 1, and it's going to volume vol1. The source path is the SVM of NAS_M on cluster 2, and the volume over there was vol1_M. The type is XDP, and the policy that I was using before is mirror all snapshots. Okay, so that's good. I don't need to configure a schedule here because I'm just going to replicate across one time to get the changes back, and then I'm going to reverse the direction again. So that is done. I can now do a SnapMirror resync. Now, the reason that I can do a SnapMirror resync is because the SnapMirror snapshots are still in volume 1 on this side and volume 1M over on cluster 2. In fact, let's just verify that. So I'll do a volume snapshot show for vserver NAS, and for volume vol1. And there I can see that the SnapMirror snapshot is still there, the last one from the last time that cluster 1 was online. And if I go to cluster 2 and do the same command there, so a volume snapshot show for the vServer on this side is NAS underscore M, and the volume is vol1 underscore M. I can see there that I've got the SnapMirror snapshots as well. So because the SnapMirror snapshots are still there on both sides, I don't need to do an initial baseline transfer again. I can just do a resync to update the changes back over to cluster 1. So the command that I'm going to do for that is SnapMirror Resync, and the destination path here, so destination dash path is NAS vol1, and that will replicate the changes back. So it's giving me a warning message because of the timestamps here. That's all good. I'll say yes, and I can now do a SnapMirror show, and I can see that the transfer is happening right now. I'll do a SnapMirror show command again. I can now see that the transfer is completed because it is back to idle. Okay, so now I have got volume 1 in the same state, both in cluster 2 and in cluster 1. So I can now go ahead and break off the SnapMirror relationship going from cluster 2 to cluster 1. So I will do a SnapMirror KeyS, and that is for the destination path of NAS vol1. And once I've keyed it, I'll hit the up arrow, and I'm going to break it. And then when that is done, I'll hit the up arrow again, and I will delete it just to tidy everything up. And if I now do a volume show, I can see that over here on cluster 1 for volume 1, it is a read-write copy. And if I do a SnapMirror show, because I deleted everything, I'm back to everything back again the same as it was here. I've still got one more step to do though, because if we look over on cluster 2 and do a SnapMirror show over there, it is still broken off. So what I need to do here is kick off the SnapMirror replication, going from cluster 1 back to cluster 2 again. So here I will do a SnapMirror Resync for destination path. And the path was NAS underscore M, and the volume is vol1 underscore M. Say yes there, and then do a SnapMirror show. And I can see it's transferring just to get everything back in sync again. I will do a SnapMirror show command again, and everything is back to idle. So you can see that SnapMirror show here, everything is back to as it was before for the SnapMirror relationship. If I do a volume show, I can see that vol1 underscore M is back to being DP again. So that's everything back to how it was when we started on cluster 2. And if I go to cluster 1, and I do a SnapMirror list destinations, I can see that NAS vol1 is replicating to NAS M vol1 M, and it's idle. Okay, last thing to check is that everything looks okay on the client. So I'll go back onto my Windows client now. And you remember that we'd written that additional text file while it was cluster 2 that was live called test2. So let's try to connect back to vol1 on cluster 1 again. And there we go. I can see that I do have access again. And there is test2. That is a change that was done while it was the DR site, which was live. Okay, so that was everything that I needed to show you here about how to configure SnapMirror DP mirrors, and also how to fail over to your DR site, and then how to fail back to the main site again. Thanks for watching. If you want to get hands-on practice with NetApp storage for free on your laptop, then you can download my free ebook, which you can see above my head right now. Also check out my NetApp Storage Complete course, which will teach you everything you could possibly want to know about ONTAP. Thanks.